Hey everybody, I'm sad to say that this is the last time that I'll be reading aloud Marshfield Dreams, so we're really going to be reading the end of the book today. So we left off where Ralph finds out that he's going to be moving. This chapter is called Moving Days, and here's a picture of Ralph at the beach. Moving Days. Nobody was happy about moving except maybe mom and dad and the little kids who didn't really have a clue what moving meant. Chicago's not near the ocean, Lainey pointed out one night at supper. Jimmy moaned. No geography lesson, okay? No, but it's on Lake Michigan, which is huge, Dad said. When you're on the lake, you can't see the other side. It's like being at the ocean, except it's fresh water, not salt. I don't want to move, Tommy said. He stuck out his lower lip and folded his arms across his chest. Me neither, Jimmy agreed. Are Stephen and Peepers coming with us? Johnny asked. No, Mom said, shaking her head. We'll find a good home for them here in Marshfield. Am I going to move? Bobby asked, looking up at Mom. No, you've got to stay here, Jimmy told him. Bobby's face fell. It looked like he was going to cry. That's so mean, Lainey said, glaring at him. So what? Jimmy made a face at her. Jimmy, Mom gave him a warning look. Hey, I was just kidding, Jimmy replied, looking at Bobby. Can't you take a joke? Bobby nodded his head and tried to smile. You're definitely coming with us, Mom said. Rubbing the top of Bobby's head, how could we go anywhere without you? Mom and Dad stayed busy packing, but Jimmy made himself scarce. I got glimpses of him wandering through the woods alone or with his friend Ricky. Once I saw him near a stone wall, at a place where we often dug up colorful glass bottles among the trash that someone had buried long ago. We made our final trip to Wrexham Beach. Jimmy found a dead sand shark that had washed up on shore. He ran back to our blanket to get his pocket knife. The kids who gathered to watch squealed when they saw Jimmy cut open the shark's belly. He located the shark's stomach and sliced that open too. One girl gagged and ran off. You can see what he ate before he died, Jimmy said, showing us a bottle cap plus two small, partly digested fish. That night, I listened to Jimmy breathing in his bed. Roaming around outside was what he loved best, and the idea of moving away from the woods must have been terrifying for him. But he didn't talk about it, so I could only guess. I worried about him. He still wasn't doing very well in school. Would things be any different in Illinois? The next day, I wanted to have one final game of war, and so I took it upon myself to organize a big one with all my brothers and friends and neighborhood kids. My team had been my brothers, plus Andy, Steve, and Larry. It was our best war ever, and it ended with a bloody battle, with everybody standing 20 feet away from each other, holding up their sticks and firing at point blank range. Then the last kid fell and the woods went quiet. I didn't want the game to end, so I lay there for a whole minute, letting imaginary smoke drift away in the breeze. Mom stood on a chair and wiped my fingerprints off the door jamb for one last time. She packed dozens and dozens of boxes, but for some reason I still found it hard to wrap my head around the word moving. I had lived in that house, in Marshfield, practically my whole life, and it never occurred to me that we might end up living anywhere else. I figured I had a lock on this place, that I'd be here forever, or at least until I grew up, the way Karen Arenberg knew she would be sitting in the first seat, first row at school until she graduated from high school. My mom brought the electric clippers outside and gave each boy a wiffle haircut. I went last, and by then there were clumps of hair all over the porch. Mom always told us that the birds would add our cut hair to twigs and grass to make their nests. That had sounded like a fairy tale, but now I wanted to believe that some part of me might live on in these woods after I was gone. Nice haircuts, Dad said after supper. I looked down at the table at Jimmy, Tommy, Bobby, Johnny, and Joey. Mom had cut our hair extra short. My brothers reminded me of the baby chicks when we first got them. I must have looked that way too. Who wants another slice? Mom asked. All the silverware had been packed away, so we were eating pizza on paper plates. Mrs. Pratt had brought over the pizza, a salad, some chips, and guacamole, which we hardly ever ate. I do, Tommy said. I don't, Kathy said, a 3-year-old. She spoke with a funny, high-pitched voice. How's everybody doing? Dad asked, as if he didn't know. We were all feeling pretty glum. Jimmy, one thing you never told me, Jimmy said. Do they have any woods near our new house? I don't know for sure, Dad said. I saw lots of trees. Trees aren't woods, Jimmy pointed out. My friends won't be there, Lainey murmured. But don't forget, Mom said, all 10 of us will be moving. Jimmy leaned back and noisily cracked his knuckles. Unfortunately, he sighed. That's not a bad thing, Mom told him. You'll be in a new neighborhood, but you'll already have 8 kids to play with. I never thought of it that way before. On the first day, we could play a game of war, me, Bobby, and Joey versus Jimmy, Tommy, and Johnny. It wouldn't be the same without Andy, Steve, and Larry, not nearly, but I told myself it was better than nothing. Who wants some guacamole? Mom asked. I do, Dad said. Yuck, said Kathy, pointing to the greenish goop. You should try it, Mom said to her. It's really good. I don't want rock and rolly, Kathy cried, which cracked everyone up. We still didn't have a place for Stephen and Peepers. Finally, Mr. Waters, Larry's father, said they could come live with them. But we've got hens. We've got hens, but no roosters, he said, so there shouldn't be any fighting like there was at the other place. It seems like the perfect solution, given the fact that there was no way Mom would let us bring the roosters to Illinois. Mr. Waters was a nice guy, and I just knew he couldn't get rid of our roosters the first time they got into trouble. So we agreed. Mr. Waters came over with his pickup truck early one morning and took the roosters away. Next day, the whole family went over to Larry's house to check on them. The roosters ignored us, but it was so hard to feel sad with Stephen and Peepers looking so happy in their new home. The birds strutted around like a couple of VIPs, heads high, chests out, surrounded by 4 dozen clucking hens. They've always had lots of attitude, my mom said, laughing. That's a good thing for a rooster to have, Mr. Waters replied. We're going to move, but they move first, Bobby whispered. We won't be able to check on them when we're in Illinois, Lainey said sadly. Don't worry, Dad told her. Look at the nice big yard they've got to play in. And there's a snug hen house for cold nights, Mr. Waters said. Believe me, your rooster's got it made in the shade. I nodded. I believed that Stephen and Peepers would be fine in their new home. I just wished I could be sure that the same would be true for me. The next chapter is called, let's make sure. Yeah. Okay, there's 2 more chapters. This one is called The Last Night. And there's actually a picture of Aunt Mary is holding Kathy at a final dinner with Mom, Dad, me, and Joey. So you can actually see all of them like sitting at the table before they moved. After supper, I went outside. It was late July, still light at 7 o'clock, one of those summer days that felt like it would go on forever, except I knew it would end. There was no way around it. Tomorrow, we'd get in the car and start driving west toward Chicago. In the clearing, I walked under the tripods that Jimmy designed and we built 2 years ago. What would the people who would be buying our house do with these gangly wooden structures? Leave them? Tear them down? It made me sad to think about it. I spotted a cluster of lady slippers. I thought of these wildflowers as royalty, the queens of the plant world. They were endangered, and you can get a $50 fine for digging one up. I always felt rich with one of those expensive ladies growing wild in our woods until now. I wished Andy would come outside. He'd been staying away for the past few days. So had Larry and Steve. I needed to talk to those guys. I miss them a lot, and I hadn't even left yet. That night, I laid in bed, hearing the songs of the crickets and feeling miserable. The door opened. Dad walked in. When he saw that Jimmy was asleep, he came and sat on my bed. Can't sleep, he said softly. Nope. A lot's going on, he said. Tomorrow's the big day. I turned toward the wall. I know. This has been hard for you. He put his hand on my shoulder. But you'll see, Ralph, it's going to be all right. For a crazy second, I imagined him saying, I changed my mind. We're not going to move. Of course, that didn't happen. But what did was just as amazing. He leaned down and kissed me on the forehead, something that he hadn't done since I was a little kid. That night, I had a dream about great grandma. She died a few years ago, but in that dream, she was in the backyard wearing her favorite gray sweatshirt, and I was there too. We were standing beside the garden at the spot where I once saw her plant some of our teeth. It didn't work, I said. Look, nothing ever grew here. That's not true, she replied, smiling. Look at your arms and those 2 legs. Something did grow inside this place, and that something is you. And that made me feel better. All right, here's the last chapter. This is called Funeral. And there's a picture of Ralph when he's very little, holding a garden hose. Funeral. On our last morning in Marshfield, the doorbell rang at 9 o'clock. When I opened it, I saw Andy, Steve, and Larry standing together. I was surprised to see them. Come on, we're taking you to the woods, Larry said. Dad came downstairs, everyone carrying 2 suitcases. Can I go into the woods? I asked Dad. He shook his head. We're leaving in less than an hour. Please, Dad, I pleaded, just one last time. All right, but we're leaving at 10 o'clock. Sharp, he said. When you hear me beep the horn, you come right away, okay? Okay, I promised, and followed my friends outside. They were walking in a funny way, the way you do when you're hiding a secret. What's going on? I asked. We're having a funeral, Andy replied with a solemn face. For who? You, Steve explained. A funeral? I laughed. Hey, I'm moving. I'm not dead. You'll be dead to us, Larry pointed out. We entered Ailes Woods on a path I'd run down thousands of times. I knew every rock and mushroom and pine tree by heart. In the middle of the woods, my friend stopped. There, Steve said, pointing to a small indentation in the forest floor. Lie down, dead man. I lay down. The ground was thick with pine needles and soft. My friends picked up clumps of pine needles and started sprinkling them over my body. Hey, I protested. Be quiet, Larry ordered. You're dead, remember? Keep your eyes closed. I just don't get it on my face, I muttered. They kept sprinkling the pine needles on me until my limbs and body were covered, and I could feel them like a lightweight blanket. Should old acquaintance be forgot? Steve sang. You don't sing that at a funeral, Larry interrupted. You sing that on New Year's Eve. Andy loudly cleared his throat. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye, he announced. We have gathered here to lay to rest the soul of our departed friend, Ralph Fletcher. Would anyone like to speak? I would, Steve said. Ralph Fletcher was a good friend. Last year, I had to do summer school. He came by every day to walk me home. He was a good friend, Larry agreed. About a month ago, John Berkowitz tried to beat me up, and Ralph told John, you'll have to beat me up first. So John Berkowitz punched him instead. He was a brave friend, stupid but brave. Everyone laughed, including me. He was a good friend, Andy began, and then stopped. I lay on the pine needles, eyes shut, smelling the mix of the piney smell and the good rotting earth underneath. I waited for Andy to continue, but he didn't say anything. And then he whispered, he was the brother I never had. He was a member of the Four Stooges, Larry said in a husky whisper. And then they all said together, we'll never forget him. My eyes started to water. I tilted my head so they wouldn't notice and stayed quiet. Nobody spoke. I thought of all the things I'd done with these guys, staying up late, listening to the radio while the DJ counted down the top 10, blowing off M80s and Mr. Oxner's cornfield, eating raw sweet corn, going to the Marshfield Fair every summer, arguing about which girl in our class was cuter, Lisa Kennedy, Pam Cone, or Beth Byers, fishing for crappies and sunfish, trading baseball cards, card tricks, dirty jokes, scars, stories, snacks, swears. For a long moment, it stayed quiet, and finally, I opened my eyes. They were gone. Usually, I hated it when my friends ditched me, but this time it felt different. In a strange way, I was glad they were gone. For a while, I had just laid there, looking up at the trees. I heard a car horn beeping. Ralph! It was Jimmy calling. Come on, we gotta go. Coming, I yelled back. I sat up and brushed off the pine needles. Bits of light danced in the deep forest shadows around me. I knew I'd never forget that place. And then I stood up and stepped into my new life, whatever that might be. And that is the end of Marshfield Dreams. So I really, really hope that you enjoyed it. It's one of my all-time favorites. There actually is also a second novel too. So if you're interested, you could look into that as well. I think I like how that ended too. You know, how he said, just gonna go back, how he said that he stood up and he stepped into his new life, right? So, kind of like a metaphor there, right? All right. Have a good rest of your day.